Alfred Narrow.
Mr Speaker, and as this is my first speech in the House, Mr Speaker, and to all the members of the House, can I also say kia rana to you as well. As my grandmother would say to me, kia rana, and the essence of the word order means well-being. So it actually also can be interpreted as that, may you live long and may you live well. And to you, Mr Speaker, you have longevity in this House, and you've also done well in this House, so kia rana to you. And to all the members. Mr Speaker, Christmas is a great time to stop to reflect on the year to past, what we've said and even what we've done. And Mr Speaker, I'm sure that Mr Twyford, who's just spoken, may not have had enough reflection, especially in regards possibly to this bill as the spokesperson for Housing for Labour. Because Mr Speaker, if he had reflected, he might have remembered some of the words that he spoke in 2014 at the Aotearoa Community Housing Providers, in which he said himself, and we quote his words, and these are his words on reflection, which actually go to the heart of this policy, Mr Speaker. So let's have a say. Tenants with high and complex needs may be better off being transferred to a community housing provider. Mr Speaker, the Regulatory Impact Report clearly states that there are 3,650 tenants that are looking for needs and assistance into social housing provision. And that's exactly what we're doing. And Mr Twyford, by his own words, have supported what we're doing. So a little bit confused about being the wrong policy. Mr Speaker, he also said this, our vision for that is to have Housing New Zealand and a bigger, stronger community housing sector working in partnership to deliver more social housing, more diverse types of housing, and a broad range of services. Mr Speaker, we're doing all the things. This policy actually is being confirmed by Mr Twyford, by his own words, Mr Speaker. And in fact, he said, quote from the speech that he made last year, Mr Speaker, here are some of the words, we are committed to your members having access to the income-related rent subsidy, to capital grants and stock transfer. Mr Speaker, this is exactly goes to the heart of this bill. Mr Speaker, this bill deals with the fact is that we're transferring stock. In other words, it gives a transactional mandate, a statutory mandate to the ministers to be able to transfer that stock, Mr Speaker. That's exactly what Mr Twyford has disagreed with, and in a sense, his essence is this, wrong policy, wrong time. In other words, really, it's only the wrong policy and only the wrong time because it isn't in Mr Twyford's time, Mr Speaker. It isn't in the time that he's talked about. He talked about multitudes of submissions, and so, Mr Speaker, there were only 11 written submissions, 8 oral submissions. Mr Speaker, there wasn't, in a sense, the outcry from the sector to say that this was all wrong. There were areas that we needed to tweak. There were concerns that we need to take into consideration, Mr Speaker, and that's exactly what we were doing. Mr Speaker, can I say that at the heart of this, it's dealing with the very complex needs that we know exist in our sector. At the heart of this, Mr Twyford himself has confirmed the fact is that Housing New Zealand, in its ability to provide those needs, is unable to do so. Therefore, it needs the partnership. And so the transactional mandate allows for the transfer of this stock to the partnership with the community housing providers, Mr Speaker, who have the ability to be able to provide for the complex needs of services. They may be the areas of disability and mental health. There are a variety of different needs. In fact, Mr Speaker, as we speak, there are currently 1,300 state housing tenants who have also too made application because of their high and complex needs for transfer into a social housing provider. Mr Speaker, this is not dreamt out of thin air. This is not because we think it's just an idea that maybe we could pursue. It is the right idea, Mr Speaker. It is evidence-based. Currently, Mr Speaker, one of the concerns that were raised was that maybe we were selling off the great sell-off, the State House sell-off. So let's talk about what the stock is. Mr Speaker, the commitment by this Prime Minister was to increase the state housing stock. So over 8 years, 62,000 is what the current stock was. And Mr Twyford was there, Mr Speaker, at the annual review where Mr Sarri, through his report, said this. Mr Twyford knows 67,000, an increase of 5,000 houses that currently exist, 190,000 people living in state houses. Mr Speaker, that's what is being provided by this government. So not only is it increasing the stock where it's needing, but most importantly, Mr Speaker, is wanting to ensure that we have the ability to transfer their stock into social housing providers who have the ability to meet the high and complex needs of our tenants that are there. Mr Speaker, we believe that this bill is important. We believe, Mr. Speaker, it's heading in the right direction. It's meeting those needs that are there. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, it actually is being confirmed. I want to finish off, Mr. Speaker, with again, in confirmation by Mr. Twyford, in his own words, Mr. Speaker, in his speech in this House around the income-related rents. And here's from the Hansards, from the words of Mr. Twyford, here's what he says: we are not opposed, in fact, to the Minister's intention to shift housing stock across the community housing providers. That makes sense. Mr. Speaker, I don't know what you would say. I don't want to breach anything around standing orders, but Mr. Speaker, it just sounds a little bit complicated, a little bit confused, because on one hand, Mr. Twyford is saying this is the wrong policy, the wrong time. Mr. Speaker, I would contend to say this is the right policy. It is at the right time. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, it's not just about bricks and mortar. It's not just about houses. It's about the people of those communities who absolutely need our support and our help. Mr. Speaker, I commend this second reading of the bill to the House.